So we're at the two dots on Kuf Ayin Gimel Amid base toward the bottom. And this is going on the Mishnah, which was on the bottom of the previous summit. Hamalves Chaver Olidei Orev, someone who lends, the Mishnah had said, someone who lends, right on the bottom of Kuf Ayin Gimel Aleph, Hamalves Chaver Olidei Orev, someone who lends using a guarantor, right? Reuven borrows from Shimon, and Levi guarantees the loan. From an Arab, Shimon cannot go to Levi and get the money from him. He has to first go to, obviously, to the borrower, to Reuven. And if he says that if the lashon of the arvus, of the guarantee is that Levi says, if Shimon says that I can get paid back from whoever I want, then he can go to Levi, to the guarantor. Says no, if the original borrower, Reuven, has nechasim, which in this context, the Rashbam understands it to mean talking about karka, then he can't go to Levi. Doesn't make a difference if he said Al Menashe Ephraim Misha Erza. He still has to go first to the borrower, to Reuven. So that's Zok to Gemara. Amar Rabba Bar Chan, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Lo Shano She'ein Nechasim Leiva, Al Yesh Nechasim Leiva, Al Yifra Min Ha'arav. He says about the Tanakama that which we say, that if he says Al Menashe Ephraim Misha Erza, Yifra Min Ha'arav, that's only talking about where the original borrower doesn't have karka. But if he has karka, then Shimon has to go, the lender has to first go to the borrower before he goes to the Arab, before he goes to the guarantor. The Gemara says, this is the sheet of Reb Shimon Gamliel. The way Rabbi Babachan is understanding the Tanakama, that seems to be what Reb Shimon Gamliel was saying. He was talking about where he said, and he said on that, it depends on whether or not the borrower has karka. But if the borrower has karka, you have to go to him first to get satisfaction on the loan. So what is going to be according to the way Rabbi Babachan understands the Tanakama, what's the difference between the Tanakama and Reb Shimon Gamliel? So the Gemara, Chesuri Mechsura. So you have to add in words. So we're going to reread the whole Mishnah. Someone who borrowed from his friend with an Arev, meaning, again, Reuven borrowed from Shimon with an Arev, and Levi was the Arev, Levi was the guarantor. From an Arev, you can't get paid back, you can't go to Levi to get the money. In that case, you can get from the Arev. And this is what Rabbi Bar Chana said. When is this the case? Only when there's no nechasim to leiva. Yesh nechasim leiva, but if Reuven has karka, lo yifra min arav, then you can't go to Levi. You have to go first to the borrower. The kablan, but if rather than being an arav, it's a kablan is a stronger form of arvus. Means where someone says rather than saying I'm guaranteeing the loan, he says I'm going to pay the loan. He tells him where the borrower says, he doesn't say lend money to Reuven, and if he doesn't pay, I'll back it up, I'll guarantee it. But he says, give money to Reuven, and I'm going to pay it. So that's a kabbalah. Now he's makabel, a higher level of responsibility. So the kabbalah, but if he's a kabbalah, then if he said, Amanasha Ephraim Misha Erza, then he can take from the kabbalah, he can take from the guarantor, which in this case we call a kabbalah, even though the borrower himself has karka. But Shimon Gamliel says, and he says, even in the case of a kabbalah, he's going to disagree. He's going to say, always, even in the case of a kabbalah, and even if he said, he still had the lender still has to first go to the borrower. Shimon has to first go to Reuven before he goes to Levi. Amar Rabbi Bachan, Amar Rabbi Yechon, and Kol Mak Mishana Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Mishasenu Halach Kamaisa. The general rule is whenever we say what Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, we have a sheet of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, which was the Tana of our Mishnah. The halach is always like him. Chutz me Arev, which is our Mishnah. Our Mishnah, we don't paskin like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. We paskin like the Tanakama, who says that a kablan you are going to be able to go first to the kablan, even if the borrower has money. But Tzidan v'Raya Achrona, these are two other examples, two other cases that we say the halacha is not like Rav Shimon Gamliel. Amar Rav Huna. Helveyu, so now we're going to just technically discuss what is considered a case of a kablan and what is considered a case of a loiva, of a arev. Right? We said it is a general arev with guarantees. And then secondly, you had this case of a arev on steroids, where he takes more responsibility. He's makabel on himself, where the arev accepts a higher degree of responsibility. So Amar Rav Huna, Helveyu vani arev, Helveyu vani pereya, Helveyu vani chayiv. Does any of these lashonos where the guarantor said, lend the money to Ruvain and I'll be the guarantor, or lend the money and I'll pay it back. Helveyu vani chayiv, lend him the money and I'll be chayiv for it. Helveyu vani etein, lend it to him and I'll pay and I'll give. Kulon lashon arvis. He said to lend it. If he says to lend, that's generally a lashon of an arev. Pain. Tain loy vani kablan. If he says give it to him and I'll be the kablan, so that's the perfect lashon of kablanus. First of all, he said give it to him instead of helveyu, give it to him instead of lend it to him, and then he said kablan, and I'm going to be a kablan, which is a stronger lashon in arev. Tain lo vani pereya, or even if he just said give it to him and I'll pay. Tain lo vani chayiv. He said, give it to him and I'll be chayiv. Tain lo vani etein. He said, give it and I'll give. Any lashon where he says first tain lo, give it to him, that's going to be a lashon of kablan. Kulon lashon kablan is saying. And like we said, we paskin like the Tanakama, who's mechalik between a kablan and a arev is going to be an afkamina lahalach. Iboilu, back to Gemara. Helveyu v'ani kablan. What if he mixes the lashonos? The first part he said you should lend it to him, but then he said I'm going to be a kablan. So the kablan part he's mekabel on himself the stronger arvis, but he said helveyu, which is the weaker one, which is more like a regular arev, not like a kablan. Tain lo ivani arev, where we said give it to him and I'll be an arev. So here the first lashon he used was the stronger lashon. He said give it to him, but then he said I'm going to be an arev, not a kablan. What do you do if he mixed the lashonos? It's not all lashon arvis or lashon kablanis, but he mixed the two lashonos. Rav Yitzchak lashon arvis, lashon kablanis. He says it depends on if you say lashon, even if he said in the first part, he said hilveyo v'ani kablan. Since he said he's being a kablan, that overrides the fact that he said hilveyo in the first part. And if he says tein loy v'ani arev, it doesn't make a difference that he said tein loy instead of hilveyo, since he said at the end arvis. We're going to go basar the actual lashon that he used. He said if he said he's an arev, he's an arev. He said he's a kablan, he's a kablan. Rav Chizda Amar Kul Lashon Kabbalah is saying Rav Chizda learns differently. He has a different sheet about which halacha we're going to apply. Everything is a lashon kablanos. Hein bar mehilveyu vani arev, unless he uses both lashonos. Both he uses lashon halva, which is arvas, and then he says also ani arev, and I'll be an arev. Anything other than that is going to be a kablanos. If he says tainloi, or if he says kablanos, anything other than both being a lashon kablanos, lashon arvas. Rava Amar kul lashon arvas. He says the other way around. Everything is a lashon arvas. Bar mi tainloi vani noisin. And the Rashbam says, or Tain Levani Kablan, those are both lashonos of Arvas of Kablanus, and therefore the din is going to be that it's going to be treated like a Kabul. We're in middle of Kuf Ayin Dal Ramanal. Amalei Mar bar Amema Ravashi. Mar, the son of Amema, said to Ravashi, Hachi Amar, this is what Amema, my father, told me. Ten lavani noisin, eila malva halaloiva klum. If the Arev, the guarantor said, give the money to the borrower and I'm going to give to you, in that case, there's really no borrower here. The guarantor is not a guarantor. The guarantor is placing himself in the place of the borrower. He's saying he's taking full responsibility, and there's no recourse to the borrower at all. So this is not accurate. That's not enough really to. He's saying that this wasn't accurate what you said over. In order for the borrower to be totally off the hook, that he has no more responsibility to pay back the loan, unless the guarantor goes to the borrower, to the lender, takes the money from him directly, and then gives it over to the borrower. But any type of case where the borrower takes the money from the lender, no matter what lashon, even if the guarantor says, give the money to the borrower, and I'm going to back it up, I'm going to pay it back to you, he still doesn't mean to take it away, that there's no responsibility of the borrower at all. Unless he directly takes the money from the lender and gives it to the borrower. He acts as an intermediary. Then the recourse of the lender is to the guarantor, who's not a guarantor, he's the actual borrower. Ahu daina, there was this dayan. The achse lemalva lenichse de loiva. He allowed the malva, the lender, again, Reuven borrowed money from Shimon, and Shimon went to the Bezdin and he said, I want my money back. And the Bezdin wrote him a foreclosure notice. Said, you can go take from Reuven's property. Mekame de litve loiva. Before Shimon ever went to the loiva to ask for his money. So he skipped the whole step of asking for his money back. The first thing he did was get a foreclosure notice to take Reuven's property prior to asking for the money, which is obviously very sketchy, right? You'd be upset if the bank showed up one day to take your house and said, "Oh, we know you've been paying your mortgage every month, but we decided rather than asking you for your mortgage payment this month, we're just going to take your property." Salke Rav Chanan Bereder of Yeva. Rav Chanan Bereder of Yeva took back the property from the lender, and not only that, he kicked out this judge. He said, you are impeached because of malfeasance. Amar Rava man chacham l'mevet ki amilsa ilav Rav Chanan Bereder of Yeva. Who is big enough chacham to realize the only person who has the plates, who has the shoulders to do such a thing and kick out the judge for this malfeasance? Only Rav Chanan Bereder of Yeva. Why does he say like this? Kasava nechseha the bar inish inan ma'arvin yasya. He holds the property of a borrower are treated like an arev, right? That which a person has a shibud, that he could take away the property of a borrower, that's because the property is treated like a guarantor. It guarantees the payment. Utnan, and we learned in our Mishnah, Hamavas Chavero al Yidei Arav Lo Yifra min Arav. He can't pay from someone who uses an Arav. He can't get payment from the Arav. The Kaimlan Lo Yitva Arav Tchila. He means he can't go for the Arav Tchila. So this is the same thing. The same way that you can't go to a guarantor first, we're saying that the property of a borrower is a form of arvas. It guarantees the loan. But we learned in our Mishnah, the Arav can't be gone. You can't go to the Arav first to get payment. You first have to go to the borrower. The same thing will hold as far as the property of the borrower. It's just an Arav. You first have to go to the borrower himself and ask for the money first. It doesn't seem... my only question about this, why do you need a grace of chacham to come up with this? It seems very pashut. Like we all understand that you can't take someone's property before giving him the opportunity to pay. But I guess the tzushtel was the chiddush, that he shtelled the tzu to an Arav. Hahu arva de yasmi. There was an Arav of Yisaimen, meaning Yaakov had borrowed money, and he had a guarantor. He got Levi to be his guarantor. And then Yaakov died, and now the debt passed on to his children, to Reuven. And Levi jumped ahead, and he paid back. He was the guarantor of the loan. he jumped ahead and he paid back the loan. The Pare Lamalva, he paid the borrower, he paid Levi, who was the person who Reuben owed money, Yaakov owed money to, and now Reuben was a Yasam, a cotton, and now it fell into his lap. But before Reuben could involve himself in it, Levi paid back. Levi, who was the Arev on the loan, paid it back before going to the Yisayimim to get it. And yeah. And this Yasam was a cotton. And now Levi is going back to Reuven, to this Yasam, and saying, you have to pay me back. The din is when an Arev pays, when a guarantor pays, it creates a new debt from the borrower to the guarantor. Right? If you pay in his place, now he owes you the money. So now Levi, the guarantor, is going to the assignment and saying, I paid back the chayv that you inherited from your father. Amar Papa, Priyas bal chayv mitzvah, v'yatmi lav b'nei me'evin mitzvah ninu. He says that the din that which you have to pay back a chayv, and the way the Rashbam explains it is a chayv that's a milva al peh. A milva al peh is just a mitzvah, and these are katanim, so they don't have to do a mitzvah. So I'm just going to harken back, give a callback to something we had discussed. We had once discussed the concept that if a borrower sells, if a lender sells a note, sells a note, right? So Reuben owes money to Shimon, and Shimon sells a note to Levi. We said, even though Levi can go collect the chayiv from Reuven, if Shimon is meichel the chayiv, then the chayiv is mach. I don't know if you remember when we said that, and we explained it, because we said there's two different parts of a loan. There's the shibud, there's the part of the lien, and there's the chiyuv. And that's why the lender can be meichel on the chayiv, even though the shibud went to someone else. So this is really the same type of concept. We're saying that although there's a shibud, even though the Yasim owes money to this Arav for paying the loan on his behalf, but since it's only a milva al peh, this new shibud, I shouldn't say shibud, this new chayiv that's created from the Yasim to the Arav for paying the loan on his behalf is only a milva al peh. Milva al peh, there's no shibud. All there is the chiyuv to pay it back. And since it's only a bare chiyuv without a shibud, Yasim is not, a cotton is not mechuyev in mitzvahs, and therefore he's potter from paying it back. The same dichotomy where we separate the shibud from the chiyuv, and therefore we say cotton is not mechuyev in mitzvahs. That's the explanation of Papa why the Yasim doesn't have to pay back until he becomes a gadol. Then he's going to have to pay back to Ar. For Huna Breder of Yeshua Aimer, he says differently. He says no. The chachamim were masakin that a cotton does have to pay back, even this chayiv that's just a milval peh. But there's a different reason why the cotton doesn't have to pay it back. Ematsrari atvasei. This is a concept we've seen before, that we say maybe Yaakov, even though he owed money to Levi, the father, maybe he had also given a bundle of cash in a bag to Levi to pay back the chayiv. Maybe he had already given him money to pay it back. It means maybe there's some reason why the Yisayimim would dispute this loan. So you, the Arev, went ahead and paid it. Maybe they wanted the opportunity to dispute it. So therefore, they shouldn't have to pay it until they're old enough to figure out whether they actually mechuyev to pay it. My beinai, what's the difference of what the reason is? In the end, it comes out to the same thing that we say the katanim don't have to pay until they become gedailim. One difference would be where Yaakov was already maida before he died, that he owed the money, that there was no tzara atvasei. Inami deshamtu uba umeis beshamte, where he had already been foreclosed on. Yaakov had already been judged in din that he owes the money, and he never disputed it. So it's not that he was maida, but the Bezdin already decided he owed the money, so there was nothing to dispute. So Reb Papa's reason of maybe it had already been prepaid, the loan had been prepaid, is not relevant. So in that case, the cotton would have to pay, the Yasam would have to pay back the loan. Shalchu mitam. They sent from Eretz Yisrael, Shamtu Umeis B'Shamte. If this din hataka happened, this case happened that it had already been decided in Bezdin before, and so there was no issue of Tzrari Atvasa. Hilchos like Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua. We pass on like Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua, who said that the second shot of Emer Tzrari Atvasa, and that's not negay, and therefore the Yasam Cotton will have to pay the Arav. Meisvei Frektigmar. Arav Shahayu Shtar Chayiv Yoitza Mitachas Yadai. An Arav that has a Shtar Chayiv, meaning that he paid the lender, and the lender gave him the original Shtar Chayiv that the money was owed. Ein a Goiva. He can't be Goiva from a Yasam. Ve'im Kasa by his Kabalti Mimcha. However, if the shtar is not just the original shtar that the borrower had given to the lender, that he then gave to the Arav when the Arav paid him, but it said in addition, the lender wrote that on that shtar, I received the money for the loan, Goiva. In that case, he could go back to the Yisayimim and be Goiva from the Yisayimim K'tanim. So Bishlam Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua, according to Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua, how do you have such a thing? It could be where the person who was chayiv, Yaakov, had already admitted that there was no tzara atmase, and that's why he could be goiva from Yisayim. El Rav Papa Kasha, according to Rav Papa, who says it's because a cotton is lav b'nei bar mitzvah. He doesn't pay. He has no mitzvah to pay back the chayiv. It doesn't make a difference if he was invited. He just doesn't have a mitzvah to pay it back. So Shani Hasam lahachi tarach b'kasav lahis kabalti. We say no. In a case where the lender wrote his kabalti and he gave it over to the Arev with this lashon, that creates just like Rav Huna Bar Yeshua says that we don't say that Priyas Bal Chayiv mitzvah and a cotton is not mechoyev. On every Arev, he says in the case where you said his kabalti, then the Chachamim will masaka, and in such a case where the Arev had paid with a expectation that he was going to get paid back, we don't want to throw sand in the gears of commerce and make it that people won't want to lend money because they're not going to be sure if the Arav is going to be able to pay it back. So therefore, the Chachamim Misakin in a case where he wrote his kabalti, that the Arav, we won't say the din of Priyas B'Chayiv mitzvah, and he'll be able to get his money from the Yisayim. Hahu Arvad Oivet Koichavim. There was a case, so again, instead of Reuven borrowing money from Shimon, Reuven borrowed money from Tom, from an Oivet Koichavim. And Levi was the Arev. So he was an Arev to Oivet Koichavim. The Pare Oivet Koichavim. So then Levi went and paid Tom for the money that Reuven owed to Tom. Mekami L'Tvinu Liyasmi. This is talking about Yisayimim. So it wasn't just Reuven, it was really Yaakov, who was the one who owed the money, and he had died, and now his Yisayimim owed the money to the Oivet Koichavim. Amalei Rav Mordechai Rav Ashi, Hachi Amar Avimi Mehagunya Mishmei Derava, Afilam and Amar Chashinan L'Tzrari. Even according to Yeshua Rav Huna Breder of Yeshua, who says that we're worried about Tzrari Atva, saying that's the reason why you can't be goiva from the cotton. Hani Mili Yisrael. That's only by Yisrael, where the money is owed to Yisrael. You think maybe the father had prepaid Yisrael. But since they're Arabs and they follow Goyish law, we don't know Chayish Tzari. So in fact, the Mar Amalei Adarabba. I feel mandam Eloi Chayish Tzari. Hani Mili Yisrael. Avik Kivi that they need Basra Arba Asli. Ilav the Atzir Sorry me Ikar Le have a Makabale. Says it's the other way around. Even according to the mandam that says we're not Chayishinin. I'm sorry. Kivin the Basra Arva Azal doesn't mean halachas of Arva. It means if he's a guy, we don't think that the father had prepaid to a guy. So he said back, no, it's the other way around. Even according to the Mandama that says that were not chayish sorry. That's only by yid. Aval avdi kechavim kibbut adinu basar. But since they go basar the halachas of Arevis, they're very quick to go after a guarantor, right? That's the way it is in our laws. If a mortgage if you co-sign on your kid's mortgage, they're going to go to you in a lickety split. If your kid is 2 minutes late on paying their mortgage, they're going to come call you up and say you got to pay it. The Arev would not have been masking to be an Arev since he knows he's so on the hook in secular law and Gayish law, unless there was a prepayment that was deposited by the lender. So it's nishkin kash. So the Mishnah said a second in, right? We said that if Ruvain married Rachel, and at the time that he married Rachel, Shimon said, I'm going to guarantee the ksuba, and then Reuven wants to divorce Rachel, and now Rachel's going to get the ksuba, we're worried about that maybe Rachel and Reuven are conspiring to get money out of Shimon, out of the Arev, and they're going to just get divorced, and she's going to get the ksuba because Reuven doesn't have any money, and then they'll live high on the hog from the money that she got, and they're going to remarry. So therefore, we make Reuven make a neder when they come to get divorced. He's not going to have any hana in the future from Rachel, so he won't be able to remarry. Moshe bar Etzri arva de ksubasa de kalosehab. Moshe bar Etzri was the arev for the ksuba of his daughter-in-law. Rav Huna Bray, and Rav Huna his son. Rav Huna was the son of Moshe bar Etzri. He was learning in Kail. Since he was learning in Kail, he had not a nickel to his name. He had no money. And every Erev Shabbos, they were scrounging around for some herring to eat over Shabbos. They had no money to live on. Amr Abaya said, Leika the Nazel, the Nasve, Eitzel, Rav Huna. Why doesn't someone go give Rav Huna, the son of this Moshe bar Etzri, who was the Arev for his son's ksuba? The Nigrisha, tell Rav Huna he should be Megarish his wife, Lidvisu, and then she'll be able to get the ksuba from her father, which is exactly the conspiracy that our Mishnah said that we make a rule that you have to make a neder that the husband's not going to have any hana from the wife.
From her father or his father?
From his father. His father was the one who guaranteed the ksuba. And after he does it, he could go remarry her. So this will solve their financial problem. It's not. But we said in our Mishnah, the Mishnah said you can't do this because the Mishnah said Bezin is going to force him to make a neder that he's not going to have enough from her, so he won't be able to remarry her. So you're not trying to get Rav Huna permanently divorced from his wife. He says there's an easy way to avoid that problem. It's true that the Mishnah said that you have to force him to make a neder. But if he just goes and is Megarish without going to Bezin, he just gets to Adam and he writes a get, then he hands it over to her. She's Megaresha, she takes the get, she goes to her father-in-law and gets the money, and then they remarry. And Bezin is never the wiser. If you don't go to Bezin, Bezin can force you to make a neder. Doesn't seem very above board, right? In the end, they became aware that Rav Huna was a kain. So all this scheming behind the scenes about trying to find Eitzah for him to get money by ripping off his father was all not relevant because he can never remarry his wife if he divorced her. Amar Abaya, Hainu Damri Inchi Basa Anya Azla Anyusa. Whoever's an ani, they remain an ani. That means things never work out. Once you're an ani, so it means they had this whole eitzah to help Rav Huna get out of his aniyas. This is what the Rebbeinu Shalom decided: you're going to be an ani, and he's not going to be able to get out of it.
But this is a crooked way of getting out.
Listen, it was coming from Abaya. Abaye would say it wasn't, coming from some underworld boss. Obviously, it was allowed. I guess this was a strategy. It was like like a tax shelter strategy. This is a strategy. It wasn't a tax avoidance scheme. It was a strategy.
There's no,
If you,
his father is there.
it's all the difference. As a tax law, I learned it's all the difference. If you call it a tax shelter, it's no good. If you say it's a tax reduction process strategy, that's okay. It was a cash accumulation strategy.
And so this isn't the cumulative alpha factor here.
Um, so look the Gemara. Let's see what the so the Umi Amar Abaya Hachi. Does Abaya really hold this? Amar Abaya Ezu Rosh Arm Zam Mesi Eitzel Limko Menichse Kirshim Gamliel Kirshim Gamliel. This is we had earlier Eitzel that Kirshim Gamliel had given. I forgot what it was about. But he had given a way to avoid to basically massage the rules to get some benefit. And he said someone who gives someone an eitzah how to do that is a rasha because he's not even benefiting himself. So over here, how could Abaya give an eitzah to get around the rules? So Gemara B'nai Shani. So the Gemara answers, this is what you just said. B'nai Shani, that really a father is always in a tough position. He doesn't want to give to his kids because then they're not going to have any incentive to work themselves. But if his hand is forced to do it, so then he's not, he's not spoiling them. This is okay. Listen, I'm following the din. Okay, here's the money for the ksuba. You don't like that shot? You should know when you'll get older, you realize it's a big problem. You want to help your kids. You also know it's not good for your kids to help them too much.
100%. I mean, I totally realize that.
But
I'm a harsh parent.
Okay, but you also have to be a good parent. Like you want them to you give them advice, right? Advice you're generous with. You want to help them. You want them to be mitzliach. You don't want to spoil this. You have to. You got to balance. You got to balance how you could help. Because you do things behind the scenes. You give them, especially if also it depends on what your chaylis is. If you have the capacity. So B'nai Shani v'tzomer Rabbanan Shani. In addition, this was Rav Huna. He was a great Talmid Chacham. So therefore, Abaya was makel to have his father help him, and he was a Talmid Chacham. He was in Kail. He was makel that it's allowed to bend the rules. In fact, okay, should we start this? No, we're going to stop over here because this is a new question. Well, let's listen until they start. May as well go. In fact, how could he be? How could he pay? How could the father pay? He's an Arav. But Kaimel an Arav Ksuba loy Meshabed. An Arav for a Ksuba is not Meshabed. So Gemara Kablan Hava. He was a Kablan. We're going to see in a minute where this thing comes from, that Arav on a Ksuba. Our Mishnah said that Arav on a Ksuba has to pay. So what are we saying he doesn't have to pay? Hani Chaman Kabbalah and the Ksuba Afagav the Lesle Nixi Labal Meshabed. Shapel Mandame Yisle Meshabed Lesle Meshabed Mayika Lamemer. Okay, no, they're starting. Okay. Okay, we'll do this again. We'll do this tomorrow. Shkayach.